Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast. We have a good episode for you today. A couple topics that we're going to run through on this Labor Day weekend. Happy Labor Day to all. Um, so, uh, so a couple topics I want to run through. So the first one I want to talk about Travis Hunter and the impressions that he left on opening night of college football. His Colorado Buffaloes went against the North Dakota State Bison. They ended up with a victory, 31-26, which most people think they should have won by a lot more. Um, but they did make some improvements on the offensive line as well as the defensive line. I feel, even though they're very susceptible to the run. Um, but a lot of those runs were the quarterback just getting out of the pocket and, them running man coverage and the quarterback getting out of the pocket and having a mobile quarterback, which, they'll face tougher competition. And they'll probably have to face that same problem. So they probably have to switch to a zone more uh, or just somehow figure out how to quarterback spy on whatever quarterback it is. But nonetheless, offensively, they had a very good game. Um, Shador had 445 yards passing, and uh, Jimmy Horn had 198 yards receiving, as well as Travis Hunter had 132 yards reception and receptions as well. Uh, but that wasn't my biggest take from the game. Shador was great, and the one interception he had was just bad luck. It fell off somebody's calf muscle and bounced in the air into a North Dakota State player's hand. So, but other than that, he had a great game. But just my take on Travis Hunter, which last year he kind of showed us, glimpses of his greatness before he had that injury, that lacerated kidney injury he had. Um, but just his ability, just on both sides of the football, and I'll get into it a little bit later. It'll pose different questions for whoever's trying to draft him. But I think from a standpoint of uh, being valuable to your team, he was, you know, statistically, it'll show more on offense because defense. From what I watched the whole game, I didn't really see them go his way. They didn't pass a football towards his way, and if they did, they threw it out of bounds. So he had the Deion Sanders type effect where I might not gain statistics on the defensive side of the ball, but I'll shut a whole side down, and that's what his ability is. And I think he's a little bit, he's taller than Deion, a little bit longer than Deion, pause, and and I just think he can affect the game more because Deion played offense as well, but he wasn't really known for it. I think Travis Hunter is the first person that can be known on both sides of the football for his abilities. Um, Tyreek Hill even commented on the night of his game and said, "Whoever got that first pick, I don't care if you need a lineman or a quarterback. Travis Hunter is one of one," and he, hit the nail on the head. It's just similar when Jordan, not comparing Travis Hunter to Jordan, but it was similar to when Jordan was going to get drafted and Portland had the first pick, and they asked Portland, they said, "Hey, uh, we need a center. We don't need a shooting guard or a guard." Um, Somebody told the person from Portland, say, "Hey, well, just put Michael Jordan in center. These are once in a lifetime players. You find a spot for them. You make trades, so you do whatever you have to do after the fact. But if you can find a once in a generation type player like this, you definitely want to draft him, and you can't let that go by." Bart Scott kind of gave him praise as well by saying he was the Otani of college football. Of course, Otani is a MLB two-way player who pitches and he's a hitter as well. So just shows you kind of his value and the praise that everyone is giving him, despite the hate that Colorado receives. Usually, when people talk about Travis Hunter, they always have good things to say about him, opposed to Dion or maybe Shador. I think a lot of people resent Colorado just for the fact of um, they're breaking in new barriers in um, college football, similar to a Kalen Clark, which we'll get to later. A lot of people resent that, but it comes with the territory to being a groundbreaker. You got to it's gonna come with criticism and unfair criticism at that. So uh, eventually that'll work itself out over time. People will get accustomed to it eventually, and they'll start hating on somebody new. So that's how it usually works. Um, so during the broadcast of the Colorado game, they kind of mentioned, or they brought up other notable two-way players from the last couple decades or so. So they bring up, Charles Woodson, sorry, who played receiver and cornerback, as well as Champ Bailey, who played receiver and cornerback, Miles Jacks, who played linebacker and running back, which I didn't know he played running back. 'Cause he played linebacker in the league, in the NFL, and Chris Gamble, who played receiver and cornerback. Um, some very good, notable two-way players, but like I said, Travis Hunter is, um, I feel, more versatile on both sides of the football, because you can play both sides of the football, but your impact, like I said, it won't show up in the stats defensively. Uh, but when you break down the second level stats and see that there weren't passes on his side of the football, uh, that shows up. That's one of those stats that don't show up, but it show up in a box score um, at the end when the victory is won. Um, so I just think it'll be very interesting to see. Because watching that game, I was thinking to myself, I said, um, if a team drafts him, are they drafting him as a wide receiver or a cornerback? And then you have to think about what the team needs. So if it's a team, some teams need him at both spots, but of course, with the high demand of the NFL, he's probably not going to play um, on both sides of the football. It'd be too demanding, too taxing. And plus, he's a smaller player. He's probably only 180 pounds or so. He's a smaller player, so his injury risk would be a lot higher playing all that. He can't play cornerback, receiver, do some special teams. That'll be too demanding. So they would have to figure out which side of the football to put him on. And in my opinion, I would probably gear more towards the cornerback side of things. Um, just because, for the simple fact, receivers are more dime a dozen than cornerbacks. Uh, you can find a receiver. If you got one receiver, you can pretty much put pieces around them and you can figure it out. But cornerbacks, on the other hand, you can never have too many quarterbacks. Too many cornerbacks, in my opinion. They're a lot more tougher to find. Um, like I said, every year there's so many receivers that are underdrafted and they find their value once they get to a team. But cornerbacks, on the other hand, it's not that many stories. And maybe the last 10 years, I can only really think of Josh Norman, who was like underdrafted. I'm pretty sure there are a lot more examples, but Josh Norman was probably the most notable one. He went to a smaller school in college, um, so he was kind of like underdrafted and undervalued. But for the most part, receivers are, you know, there's abundance of receivers you can name. You can't name that many top corners. You can name a plethora of top receivers. Uh, so I don't know. I think the league will find a way to um, force him to one side of the football, just because, for the simple fact, it's never been done before. But in college, it's never been done before either. He played uh, every snap except for two snaps on offense and defense. And I know one snap he didn't play because his helmet fell off, and the rule dictates that you have to sit out the next play. So that's the only reason he missed that one play. I'm not sure about the other play, but that's man, to keep that up for a career would be very demanding. Like I said, the average NFL career is probably less than 4 years on average. So you would be, shortening up your career by, playing all those snaps in the NFL. In college, you can probably get away with it because, he's just so much better than everybody else. And his abilities are just, he's already at the pro level already. So when he gets to the NFL, they're definitely going to probably just pin him to one side of the football. He might come in for a few plays on offense or come in for a few plays on defense, but for the most part, he's not going to be a starter on both sides of the football. I don't think so. So just put in the comments what do you think about his abilities and where they'll make him play, or if you think he can play on both sides of the football. Like I said, if he was to play on both sides of the football, it'd be a first time. Pretty much, Dion. Like I said, he dabbled in it, but he wasn't like a staple. Like you seen him on offense on plays, but you didn't they didn't really run plays for him. It was just kind of a spare of the moment type thing, trick play stuff. Um, but yeah, and this weekend, just to shift gears a little bit, I watched the Indiana Fever and Chicago Sky game. This is kind of like my first year watching the WNBA more extensively. Uh, yeah, I'm just a fan of the game, the fundamentals that they have, and their ability to and their ability and love for the game. You know, you can probably say it's because uh, women's sports is always fundamentally sound because you know they're not getting paid as much. When I feel like when you're getting paid less, your a love for the game is actually stronger, which you think would be the opposite. But um, if you're able to make what you make playing the sport where your counterparts are making millions, that shows your love for the game because you probably did anything else and probably made the same amount of money, right? But your love for the game, it's not about the money, it's the love of the game, and that's why I love the WNBA so much. I feel like they really love the game. It's not about the money as much; it's more about uh, the love for the game and the skill set and being able to be competitive, which I think the NBA lost a little luster for after all of these huge contracts and um, money disputes and things like that. But I'm off onto a tangent. So uh, it just made me think about the Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, their teams, from a perspective of um, Caitlin Clark, in my opinion, has more help, but I'll get into that a little bit later after I talk about the unfair comparisons of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. So a lot of people compare them together because they were drafted in the same draft. They played in college against each other in the championships and the play and the NCAA tournament. But I think it's such an unfair comparison. That would be like comparing Steph Curry to uh, Andre Drummond or somebody like that, or a Michael Jordan to a Dennis Rodman. They have two totally different assignments for their teams and in their careers. I mean, for the most part, Angel Reese has been below the basket rebounder, and scoring was like secondary, maybe even third. Um, while Caitlin Clark, her role is to score and to pass the basketball, which, in my opinion, she's a way better passer than she is a scorer, at least in the WNBA. Because her three ball, it comes and goes, but her passing is always on point. People's always, players are always going to push up on her, double teamer, and she can pass out of the double team probably better than anybody in the league at this point. She leads the league in assists right now. So, um, meanwhile, Angel Reese is leading the league in rebounds. She's a rebound clear of Aja Wilson right now. Whole rebound clear as a rookie. So, like I said, their assignments are totally different. I see why people compare them because they came in the same draft, like a Magic and a Bird. But like I said, Magic and Bird was very different too. Um, Magic was known as a passer, not a scorer, not even as a rebounder mostly. He was mostly just known as a passer, a facilitator of the offense, while Larry Bird was rebounding and scoring, which in his, he ended up being a good passer too. So he was um, kind of a white LeBron James of sorts. Um, but it was interesting to look. Like I said, they have different styles, so it's kind of unfair to compare them. But I was looking through uh, their team stats and just seeing how much better Caitlin Clark's team is better. The Indiana Fever is better than the Chicago Sky. So the Indiana Fever averages 83 points per game, which is fifth in the league. The Chicago Sky averages 78 points per game, which is 11th in the league. The Fever right now is 16-16, which is 500. The Chicago Sky are 11-20, which is 35. They only win in 35% of their games. Um, and just to look at some scores, when I talk about more help, I'm talking about from a statistical standpoint as well as just a presence standpoint. I think defensively as well. So Chicago Sky has three scorers that are above 10 points a game. They have Kennedy Carter, which she's only started 15 games for them out of the 32. She averages 17 points a game. Angel Reese averages 13 points a game. Elizabeth Williams, which is she only played in 9 games. Only played in 9 games is averaging 10 points. So essentially, they only have two scorers that are averaging over 10 points a game. The Indiana Fever in the same 32 games has Kelsey Mitchell, who is averaging 18 and a half points a game, rounded off. Caitlin Clark, who's averaging 18 and a half points a game. Aaliyah Boston is averaging 13 points a game. And Alyssa Smith is averaging 11 points a game. So essentially, Chicago has two players averaging over 10 points a game, and the Indiana Fever has three players scoring over 10 points a game. And in the last game, you can see the difference in teams and how much better the Fever was than the Sky. Kelsey Mitchell, which I think she's been the MVP of that team, scoring wise, running out for baskets, being able to shoot the three ball, being able to hit the mid range, make free throws, being aggressive. She's pretty much the leading scorer of that team. Like I said, Caitlin Clark is right there next to her, but she's more of the facilitator. Kelsey Mitchell is the one who's making the cuts to the basket, getting open, shooting the last second jumpers for the three. Kelsey Mitchell is, like I said, she was totally she was just the dominant force for them statistically on the scoring level. So Kelsey Mitchell is, and I think highly of her just as a scorer, and even defensive as well. That goes underrated for her. And then Aaliyah Boston, um, she's their rebounder. She can score at the basket as well. But it's kind of interesting that the Indiana Fever had back-to-back number one picks. So they have two number one overall draft picks from the last 2 years. So, that team is only going to get better. They're young, um, and I feel like they don't have a player. Um, they really don't. They have a few players that, well, Kelsey Mitchell was undrafted, but they have only like two players that was in the second round. Most of their players are first round picks and the top 10 picks. So, I mean, it's a lot of talent on that team. I know it doesn't show last year because they had the number one pick and they had the worst record. But like I said, it was a young team. They just needed a facilitator, and Caitlin Clark was able to provide that for them. So now that they have that facilitator, their team is much better off. And like I said, they're going to get even better once they get that more, they get that camaraderie and they get that unity. Um, and then also, people don't realize that Chicago Sky lost Marina Mabry, who left, and she was a 14-point a game scorer. So they lost 14 points a game. Who's going to make up for those 14 points? Um, like I said, their team is basically a bunch of. They have players who are specifically like either defenders or rebounders and stuff like that. You have Camila Cardoso, who's the rookie on the team, who was drafted higher than Angel Reese. She was out for a good chunk of the beginning of the season. She came in, was able to pick up where she left off from college as a rebounder. I feel like she has a lot left to go as far as scoring. She needs to work on her post moves a little bit more. And when she get those post moves set, she's going to be a dominant force at 6'7". There's no one taller than her in the league as a starter. But her skill set as far as rebounding and being able to defend, I think she has a way to go on the defensive end too. So, but um, she'll get there. It'll just take some time. Like I said, she's still raw from the college game. So, Lindsay Allen has come along late, but she still has a ways to go. I feel like she's their only true 3-point shooter. Kennedy Carter is more of a mid-range, kind of attacking the basket type. Lindsay Allen is more of a 3-point shooter. She can drive to the lane as well. But like I said, that's not her primary game. Same thing as Diamond DeShields. But like I said, both of these teams historically are about the same in prestige. They both only have one championship in the 25 years of the WNBA, which, championships are hard to come by. But they only have the one. Um, they only have the one championship for both teams. So when you look at it from a standpoint of, if you're going to judge this thing fairly, you have to look at the help that they have around them and all of the pieces um, that Chicago Sky doesn't have, and that they lost. Kennedy Carter has been out with COVID for the last couple of games, so their leading scorer has been out. So Angel Reese right now is their leading scorer um, with 13 points a game. How many games can you win with your leading scorer only being 13 points a game? And on top of all of that, you don't have the best defensive team either. So something has to give. Uh, Hopefully next year they get a better draft pick. But, for the most part, the Indiana Fever are levels above, Chicago Sky. Um, yeah, so, that's just the way I look at it. Like I said, you have to judge it from that standpoint. They don't have many pieces to put around them. It's kind of like when LeBron and the Melo comparisons came out, because of course they was in the same draft as well. Melo had a little bit more help, and he was able to make the playoffs his first year in the NBA. While LeBron, I think it was second or third year before he could make the playoffs. He didn't have many pieces. Of course, he had the first. Uh, Cleveland had the first pick, so of course they're going to be the worst team. Well, one of the worst teams, because they have the lottery system. So they were one of the worst teams, and they have many pieces around him, and he can only do so much as a rookie. Still averaging 25 points and I believe almost 6 assists a game. But for them to make the playoffs, he probably would have had to average like 30 something points a game, which was, that's not his game for the most part. He's a facilitator first. So just give Angel Reese more time to grow, and same thing for Caitlin Clark. They still have ways to go as far as being the top teams in the league, but eventually it'll come around to they'll be the top teams, kind of like the Aces and the New York Liberty, which I think is probably the best team in the league. But they have a ways to go, so just give it time. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Urban Scope podcast.